And they said, you're at a 7 and we can feel his head. At the time, I was like, oh my gosh, we're gonna have a baby in like an hour. It honestly gets a little blurry for me at this point. For those of you who know me, you know that I have been trying to, or wanting to, start a YouTube channel for over 10 years. It's always been a passion of mine to create videos, to share my story, and so that's where we are now. I have a lot of very exciting videos in the works, but to start off, I thought I would just do my birth story because I also want to document it so that I just have it while it's still relatively fresh in my mind. So yeah, let's get into it. So I had my son Graham on June 14th, 2025. His due date was July 4th, so he was 37 weeks when he came. I actually went into labor at 37 plus 0, and then I had him 37 plus 1, so it was pretty surprising. There were no signs at all that I was in labor at the time. I didn't have a bloody show. I didn't feel sick or have any types of like digestive system. You know, nothing was indicating that I was close to labor except for maybe seeing my belly drop. But I also know that that can happen like weeks leading up, so I didn't really read into it. But anyway, I was actually planning to go to a bachelorette party that weekend. I had family in the area where the party was, so I wasn't staying there, but I did bring my husband, and so I went home after the festivities for the day, and then we watched a movie, and I started to feel this like pain in my back that I hadn't felt at all this pregnancy. And I guess helpful context is that I actually had a doctor's appointment that morning. They didn't offer me a cervical sweep. I'm like a little far out now because he's 8 months old, but they didn't offer me a sweep. I didn't want to check because it was so early. I figured it didn't matter. At least from everything I've read, it said that it really doesn't. So I didn't get anything, but I did check his location because I was kind of worried that he was traverse, because I only ever felt him like kicking on one side and then like moving his arms in another side, but never like, it wasn't straight up and down. Anyway, they looked at his location on an ultrasound and he was perfectly head down. He was just sunny side up. And so I knew because of that, I would probably experience a back labor. So that's the only thing that made me think maybe something was going on. But I was so in denial, you guys. Like, my mom had predermal labor with my brother, who's older, her first, for like a week leading up to her delivery. And she kept going in, they kept sending her back. And so I was fully convinced that it was not a thing at all. We were also staying in like a family cabin, but it's not insulated, and it was a stormy night. It was a full moon, which I'll get into later. Okay, I'm editing and I'm just realizing that I did not tell you about the full moon or the storm and how that might have influenced it, but basically, I was on Reddit, and I think it was Reddit, I don't know, but I saw people saying that a full moon can cause labor and a stormy night or a storm in general can drop the barometric pressure, which can sometimes put people into labor, and it's called like storm babies, right? Like, apparently it just puts more women into labor than they would have otherwise naturally gone. So I'm wondering if the combination of those two things are what put me into labor at 37.0. Who knows? I'm sure my body was also just ready, but I just wanted to add that because I said I would tell you about it in 9 minutes, so the more you know. Yeah, at that point I was just uncomfortable. We watched a full documentary we started at like 9, and then like around 11:30, I was like, okay, I don't want to be dramatic. I don't want to ruin this bachelorette party I'm supposed to be going to, but I haven't experienced anything like this at all the entire pregnancy. And so if it's a thing, I would just prefer that we're home, because we were like 2.5 hours away from our house and our home hospital. Not that we couldn't have gone somewhere else, but obviously that's not ideal if we could have prevented it. Looking back now, it's so obvious I was in labor because I was like contracting the entire drive home. But the important thing about my contractions were that they were so consistently inconsistent. Like, I had the timers and I knew like the 3-3-1 or whatever it was. I'm a little far removed from it at this point, but I was ready and I thought I knew what to look for. But at least in my experience and my body, the contractions weren't what they were described to me as they should feel. I guess over the course of my entire labor, they obviously got stronger. I would have some right away, it would be like 6 minutes apart, but then I'd have like 2 that were 1 minute apart. And then eventually we got home, and I was contracting pretty good when I was in the car. And again, I thought I was just in an uncomfortable situation. So I was like, we'll go home, I'll take a bath, you go to bed, Josh, like, it's not a thing. And so I'm unpacking from our trip that we were just on and cleaning, and I'm packing our hospital bag. I'm just trying to like take my mind off of it, which I did, in my labor prep, know that if I am to go into labor, I'm going to want to kind of ignore it as long as I can to reserve my energy and just not overthink it and feel more pain than I need to. And so that's sort of what I was doing. But again, I fully thought it wasn't a big deal and it wasn't true labor. And firstly, I wanted to labor at home as long as possible. But second, I really didn't want to get to triage and have them send me home and then get like a big medical bill, because I actually don't know how that works, if insurance would cover it in that instance or not. But I did not want to go in at that point. And so I was doing all of the things, and then at like 3 a.m., I was like, I'm going to try and go to sleep. I couldn't sleep, so I just kept walking around. And then it was starting to get a little more real from like 4 to 5. I actually called at like 3 or 4. I was like, hey, like, I think I could be in labor. I'm not sure. And they were like, well, most women want to stay at home and labor there as long as possible. And I was like, well, that's supposed to be me, but I don't know if I am. And she asked if I was strep B positive, and I said yes. And she said, okay, well, if you want to come in, we'll want to treat you for that. So I waited another hour or 2. But at one point I was like, I don't know if this is real, but if this continues into the next day or a few days, I was like, I can't sit at my desk and work like this. It's just pretty uncomfortable. And so we went in, and then as soon as we got there, my contractions fully went away, and I was like, great. They had me lay on this triage table, and I remember not feeling anything, even though I'd been feeling things for the last several hours at that point. And I was like, I am just gonna have a bill. They're gonna think I'm making this up for attention. And the only time they would kind of kick back in is when I stood up. So they left us in there for a little bit. They gave us like water, and then I don't know what else they were doing, but it wasn't a dire situation, so it was fine. But I kept like standing up on the side of this bed trying to get them to like kick back in, because I didn't want them to think that I was making it up. They put on the band and they validated me and that they could see the contractions showing. They were gonna check me because I'd never been checked. They said something along the lines of like, whoa, and they said, you're at a 7 and we can feel his head. At the time, I was like, oh my gosh, we're gonna have a baby in like an hour. That's not what happened at all. It was like 12 hours later. But at that point, I was feeling like really good. Obviously, I was uncomfortable, but I was not in like unbearable pain whatsoever. I had my husband call our doula, who had literally just become available at that 37-week mark a few hours earlier, and she was on the way. She was going to pick up some colostrum that I had collected and bring it over, and we were going to have a baby. They moved us into our room. I got my water bottle. I'm sure a number of us have one of those water bottles at this point. And I was like, can I walk around? Because I was feeling good and I wanted to keep things moving. And they said, yeah, go for it. And then we walked for like 30-45 minutes just up and down the hallway. And then they were getting the tub ready for me because I wanted to labor in the tub. And then I went in that for a long time. And that was awesome, honestly. And then as things progressed, I went in the shower as well, and just let that shower on me, and it was so nice. I highly recommend being in the water if you can. And then eventually I got out and things were picking up. It honestly gets a little blurry for me at this point. I remember I was laying on the table, sort of on my side, and they were doing some type of like hip pelvic opener exercise. I don't know what it was, but they'd like put one of my legs up over the other and then like move my hips. I don't really know what was happening. I was just happy that they were doing something for me. I think at one point my doula was massaging my feet, and even a nurse might have been massaging me. They were so great to me, you guys. Highly recommend getting a doula. And I was at a birthing center that was attached to a hospital, so it was an awesome experience up until that point. They were getting me popsicles, and I do remember as we got closer, I was like throwing up. This is probably around like 10 10 o'clock to say like noon. And then I think what happened, I think I went back in the tub. I think. No, actually, I think I stayed on this table, and then eventually they kept checking me, and they said I was at a 10, and so they wanted me to push. Well, let me bring back into the story the fact that my contractions were consistently inconsistent. And so not only in the length between them, but also the strength. I remember pushing this baby, and they were like, all right, here's a contraction, push. And I like couldn't even feel the contraction. So I don't know what is up with my body, but it'll be very interesting for me to see what happens in my next labor and delivery experience, and if my body's more used to producing the hormones to get things going. But they actually weren't that strong at that point for me, but they wanted me to push, so we tried all these different positions, and it was very difficult and very painful. And I remember feeling like I was wrong, like I shouldn't have been doing it, because it would like shudder, this pain, the most pain I've ever felt. And like I said, it was like smooth sailing from this point. And I don't say this to scare anybody, because you'll find that something was wrong and there was a reason for it. But it was, I thought I was dying. I was gonna be like, just cut me open, just take him out. I can't do this. And the whole time I'd been fully natural, doing just fine. They decided to have the doctor come in and check me, because it had been a physician's assistant. And I find out that I'm not at a 10. I was like 9.5 or whatever it is. And then I also found out that part of my water hadn't fully broken, which I forgot to mention. My water broke when I was on the table, as things were getting a lot further along. But part of it hadn't broke. Part of it got like stuck between him, basically like if you were to like pop a balloon, but then like hold on to part of it. You know what I'm saying? And then I also had a cervical lip, which was preventing something from happening. I think from him moving. I don't really know. At this point, I was pretty far gone into labor land. Yeah, so every time I was pushing, my understanding is that it was hurting because there was no place for him to go. But anyway, they offered to break the rest of my water, which I accepted. And then they asked if they could shimmy him like around the lip, which I denied. I didn't love that idea. Once that got squared away, we were gonna keep waiting, because I wasn't actually at a 10 like they thought I was. I was pretty uncomfortable, actually very uncomfortable on that table, doing what I had been doing for the last probably hour and a half. And I asked if I could go in the tub, and they said yes. And I was surprised, because I thought that once my water broke, you weren't allowed to be in the tub unless you were like actually delivering, but they said I could. And so I don't think I've like told anybody else this, but when I was in that tub, it was amazing. I just love the freaking tub so much. But when I was in there, I remember them saying, if you feel him coming, like you need to get out. And I pushed this baby, because I could kind of feel his head at that point. I pushed this baby like most of the way. Like I wasn't gonna give birth to him in there, but I was not going back on that table doing the same thing that I was doing before. I was like, I'm making progress here the way that I know how, and it's in the tub, because the tub is amazing. So I waited a while, not too long, but pretty close, and then I got out. After that, it was like pushing for 30 minutes. Again, not fun at all. It's definitely something that I will prep more for in future labors, because I don't know why I thought it would be easy. Leading up to this labor and delivery, before I got pregnant, I was in like the best shape of my life, like running, lifting, all of the things. And I thought that would really help me. I think in a sense it kind of hurt me, because I was like so strong and tight down there. So maybe TMI, but yeah, I'll be interested to see how that goes the next time around. But anyway, he was born and everything was good. Also, I delivered the placenta, and that was like no thing. The only thing that took me by surprise was the after pain, or the contractions that you get post-delivery. The cramps were crazy. I actually used, they're like these little tinctures. I forget the brand, but I'll link them in the description. It's hard to say whether or not they helped, but I do wish I took them like immediately after delivery. I kind of waited until I had cramps, but I think if I would have taken them a little bit earlier, it might have reduced the intensity a bit. But yeah, that's my labor and delivery story. None of our family knew we were in labor, because it was so early. And I mean, we were surprised that we were in labor when we were. And I was like, I don't want to stress and have all these people calling me, like, let's just do this thing and then let everybody know. So we FaceTimed everybody, just the baby in the bassinet, and DoorDash some food, and it was such a special time. And there were like a few things that maybe could have gone a little bit better, but truthfully, it was everything I had hoped for. In having been so dilated when we got there, I think I could have stayed home a lot longer had I known what I know now, but for a first time, I think I'm extremely lucky to have the situation that I did. And yeah, I hope that this honestly comes off as encouraging for your labor. You know, not everything that you expect or want to happen is going to happen, but I think if you go in with a really open mind and sort of an excitement for the challenge, then I think you'll surprise yourself with what you're capable of and just have a good time. Like, weirdly, I'm excited to do it again. And I felt that way like right after. I guess the way that I compared it to was like, if you can run a half marathon at a threshold pace, I think you can do natural childbirth. That said, my baby was smaller because he was early. He was like 6.8 pounds, and his head in those early days was like 25th percentile. So I don't know if I had a bigger headed baby, if I could say that. But yeah, that is my birth story. If you want to like shop my hospital bag, I'm gonna link some things down below, including those tinctures for the after pains. I'm also gonna link a channel that helped me prepare for my labor and delivery. Honestly, through pregnancy, they were a great resource as well. So you can find all that in the description. And yeah, I'm gonna be posting more videos all about these types of things. Pregnancy, motherhood, trying to conceive, I don't know. I'm planning to have more babies, guys. I like being a mom, and I think it's just the greatest gift from God that our bodies are capable of doing this. If you are also in a family growing season of your life, then I would love to have you join. Subscribe to my channel, and we can be friends and raise little families together. I think it'll be so much fun. So thanks for listening, and I will see you in another video very soon.